Ghislain stares at his own reflection in a shattered shard, looking like he's about to lose it. In another piece of glass, he's screaming while clutching a sword, a total mess. He's grinning like a complete lunatic in this one, holding a single flower. On his throne, he looks completely drained, surrounded by the wreckage of his own life. Back on the battlefield, the Knight of the North is gasping for air, his face covered in blood. He looks back at the mountain of dead bodies behind him, realize he's next. Through the smoke and fire, a figure in heavy black armor approaches, dragging a massive axe. A single glowing eye stares out from behind the helmet, cold and indifferent. The knight grits his teeth, trying to find the strength to keep fighting. The mercenary king doesn't slow down, closing the distance between them. His army stands by, watching their leader about to end another legend. A group of hooded figures watches the spectacle from the tree line. Broken dolls lie scattered in the dirt, a grim reminder of how fragile life is. Ghislain feels like a pawn in a giant's hand, with a massive eye watching his every move. The Knight of the North starts to tremble, the fear finally sinking in. He lets out one last desperate scream. A metal boot slams right into his face, cutting him off mid-shout. The mercenary king stands over the broken body of the North's strongest warrior. His helmet falls away, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. It's Ghislain, and he's wearing a look of pure satisfaction. But that was a different life. Suddenly, we're back in a military camp exactly 1 year ago. Ghislain wakes up in a cold sweat, his hand reaching out for a weapon. He sits up, gasping for air and trying to figure out how he's still breathing. The memory of his death is still way too vivid. He remembers his sword falling into the dirt as his strength failed him. The moment the blade tore through his chest was unmistakable. Blood splattered across the dry earth as he slumped over. Aiden stood over him, looking down with that annoying smug expression. The red-haired knight looked completely bored by the execution. Aiden pointed his sword at the dying Ghislain, ready to finish it. Ghislain was coughing up blood, but his eyes were still burning with hatred. Aiden just scoffed, clearly enjoying how pathetic Ghislain looked. The entire Perdium line had been ended, and Ghislain was the last one left. He could only glare through the blood dripping into his eyes. Aiden reached out a hand as if he were mocking his failure. That twisted smile was enough to make anyone's skin crawl. Ghislain's vision began to blur as the life drained out of him. The shadows of his enemies loomed over him, sealing his fate. Aiden raised his sword, prepared to deliver the final strike. Ghislain let out a defiant roar, refusing to die without a fight. Aiden's eyes remained cold, showing zero remorse. The blade came down, and that should have been the end of everything. Ghislain stares at his reflection in the tub, checking his neck for a wound that isn't there anymore. He leans in closer, sweating as he realizes his face looks much younger than it should. He scans the messy tent, his eyes eventually landing on a sword leaning against some barrels. He takes a deep breath, trying to wrap his head around the fact that he's actually regressed. Suddenly, Ricardo bursts into the tent, looking completely frantic and out of breath. The soldier stops dead in his tracks, staring at Ghislain like he's seen a ghost. Before Ghislain can react, Ricardo lunges forward and grabs him by the shoulders. Ghislain's eyes widen as his decades of battle instincts suddenly flare up. Ricardo is covered in sweat, clearly terrified about whatever is happening outside. He starts shaking Ghislain, probably yelling to see if the young master is actually awake. Ghislain just glares at him, his mind already moving past the initial shock. He finally shoves Ricardo back, creating some space between them. Ricardo stands there, looking completely stunned by the sudden show of force. Ghislain just stares at him, his expression much colder than it used to be. Ricardo doesn't waste any time and starts hurriedly packing a leather bag on the ground. Ghislain watches him in silence, his eyes tracking every frantic movement. The soldier finishes packing and immediately tries to make a break for the exit. Ghislain's eye narrows as he watches his subordinate try to run away. He reaches out and snagged Ricardo's collar, stopping him dead in his tracks. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" His voice is steady but full of threat. He looks out over the landscape, seeing the Perdium estate in the distance. A flash of a black flag over a ruined town reminds him of the cost of failure in his past life. Ricardo leans in and whispers, probably trying to warn him about the danger outside. Ghislain gives his own cheek a hard tug just to make sure he isn't dreaming. He snaps his fingers as a plan starts to form, while Ricardo looks at him like he's lost his mind. A quick glance at his reflection confirms it. He's really back. A massive celestial clock appears behind him, symbolizing his jump back through time. He lets out an angry shout, venting the frustration of his entire first life. He finds himself falling through a crowd of faceless people in a hazy memory. He runs into the void, chasing after the chance to change the future. He sees himself as the mercenary king once more, standing atop a mountain of his enemies. He remembers kneeling in the dirt of a dead world, surrounded by nothing but silence. The image of his family's burning flag is burned into his mind. Now, he looks up at that same flag flying proudly over the military camp. He stares up with a look of pure determination. He covers his mouth and starts to chuckle, while Ricardo looks on in utter confusion. A close-up of his eye reveals a new dangerous resolve. He looks back at Ricardo, his expression becoming much more serious. He recalls the massacre that took place right here in the original timeline. 3 massive red-skinned orcs stand ready to tear everything apart. A whole army of them, their eyes glowing red with bloodlust, wait in the darkness. Ghislain adjusts his gear and begins walking toward the center of the camp, ready to fight. A watchtower comes crashing down, signaling the start of the chaotic ambush. Ghislain watches the collapse, his eyes scanning for the source of the attack. The soldiers are caught completely off guard, their screams of terror filling the night air. Red-skinned orcs leap into the camp, slaughtering anyone unlucky enough to be in their path. Ghislain grits his teeth, the memories of this massacre flashing through his mind. The brutal strength of the orcs is far too much for the regular soldiers to handle. A soldier lets out a final desperate cry before he's brutally cut down. Scoven charges headfirst into the fray, his blue armor gleaming amidst the chaos. A massive orc swings its heavy axe, and Scoven barely manages to block the crushing blow. The impact vibrates through Scoven's entire body, his feet sliding back through the dirt. He quickly realizes he's outmatched, sweat pouring down his face as he struggles against the beast. The orc looms over him like a mountain, preparing to deliver a final killing strike. From a distance, the situation looks completely hopeless for the veteran knight. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and grabs Scoven's shoulder, pulling him back just in time. Before Scoven can process what's happening, Ghislain dashes past him with incredible speed. Scoven can only watch in stunned silence, his mouth agape at the boy's unexpected agility. Ghislain leaps into the air, his blade catching the faint light as he faces the giant. He drives his sword through the orc's thick hand, pinning its weapon to its side. With a fluid practice motion, he delivers a strike that catches the beast completely off guard. The soldiers nearby stop in their tracks, unable to believe the scene unfolding before them. Blood sprays across the muddy ground as the massive orc is forced back by the impact. The creature's huge foot slams into the earth as it desperately tries to regain its balance. Ghislain doesn't give it a single second to breathe, his sword humming with a dangerous energy. After the beast finally falls, Ghislain walks through the wreckage with an eerie practiced calm. He extends a helping hand toward the fallen and confused Scoven. Scoven stares at the hand, his mind reeling from the impossible display of skill he just witnessed. Ghislain looks down at him, his expression cold and focused on the task at hand. He pulls the veteran knight to his feet, seemingly indifferent to the carnage surrounding them. Scoven is left breathless, his eyes searching Ghislain's face for any kind of explanation. What? Just what was that? The older knight manages to stammer out. He starts to follow Ghislain, though his legs still feel weak from the close encounter. Ghislain's gaze is already fixed on the next threat, his mind working several steps ahead. Another orc roars and lunges at them from the shadows, its tusks bared. Scoven reacts on pure instinct, raising his sword to defend his young master once more. But Ghislain is already in motion, appearing as little more than a blur of white and steel. He strikes the charging orc with a precision that borders on the supernatural. Scoven grabs Ghislain's shirt, pulling him close in a fit of confused suspicion. Who are you really? What happened to the useless brat I knew? he demands, his voice trembling. He looks down at the massive orc that Ghislain just dispatched so effortlessly. The beast is stone dead, a sword driven straight through its thick red skull. The tip of the blade protrudes from the orc's forehead, a grisly testament to Ghislain's power. Ghislain stands over the corpse, the weight of his future choices already heavy on his shoulders. Scoven can't find the words, his heart hammering against his ribs in a mix of terror and awe. He watches Ghislain's back, realizing the boy he once knew is gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. In the distance, the orc's brutal assault continues, but the focus has shifted entirely to the young noble's transformation. Ghislain wears a thin, cold smile, relishing the familiar weight of a sword in his hand once again. He moves like a predator through the chaos, his blade a silver blur that leaves a trail of orc blood in its wake. With a powerful leap, Ghislain positions himself above the horde, ready to bring down a crushing judgment. He descends with lethal precision, his sword finding its mark in the thick skull of another monster. Scoven's face is a mask of absolute disbelief. This level of mastery should be impossible for someone Ghislain's age. Blood splatters across Ghislain's face, but he doesn't even blink, his focus remaining razor-sharp. Standing atop a pile of his fallen enemies, Ghislain lets out a roar that echoes through the burning camp. He doesn't stop to rest for even a second, immediately charging toward the next group of red-skinned invaders. In one fluid motion he carves through several orcs, his speed making them look like they're standing still. Scoven remains rooted to the spot, unable to reconcile this warrior with the brat he was supposed to protect. The air is filled with the sharp scent of iron and smoke as Ghislain decapitates yet another foe with a clean swing. Breathless and covered in gore, Ghislain looks like a demon of the battlefield under the pale moonlight. He slams his blade down with such incredible force that the ground itself seems to tremble from the impact. Another orc falls, its life extinguished before it could even register the boy's movement. For a fleeting moment, a ghostly image of Ghislain's future, battle-hardened self seems to loom over his current body. Scoven's eyes are wide, his mind struggling to process the supernatural aura radiating from the young man. Ghislain releases a final, ferocious battle cry, pouring all his regressed rage into his strikes. He dives back into the thick of the fight, a one-man army determined to change the course of history. The surviving soldiers can only watch in stunned silence, their fear slowly replaced by a glimmer of hope. Scoven stands amidst his men, his gaze fixed on the distance where Ghislain continues his unstoppable rampage. He looks down, his brow furrowed as he realizes that the world he knew has just changed forever. Ghislain Perdium stands atop a pile of corpses, looking like a total madman in the heat of battle. This whole mess is happening just a stone's throw away from a quiet village. Commander Scoven watches the scene, completely stunned by the carnage. A pack of orcs charges straight for the lone human standing in their way. But Ghislain isn't backing down. He grips his sword with a look of pure focus. He's cornered at the edge of a massive cliff, surrounded on all sides by the red-skinned beasts. Instead of panicking, he actually has the nerve to smirk at them. The monsters lunge forward, thinking they've finally caught their prey. But they realize too late that they've walked right into a trap. Scoven and his men have been waiting for this exact moment to strike. The grin on Ghislain's face says everything you need to know. He leaps backward, throwing himself off the edge of the cliff. "Now!" he shouts, giving the signal for the real attack to begin. Scoven roars at his men to move forward. The shield wall surges, catching the orcs completely off guard at the very edge of the abyss. It's a massive collision as the soldiers drive the beasts toward the drop. The soldiers put every ounce of strength into one final desperate push. One by one, the orcs lose their footing and go tumbling into the empty air. They bounce off the jagged rocks as they fall toward the valley floor. The impact at the bottom is nothing but a bloody mess. The troops finally catch their breath, stunned that the crazy plan actually worked. Scoven rushes to the edge, looking for any sign of the boy who just saved them. Luckily, Ghislain managed to stab his sword into the cliff face to stop his fall. He's still got that cocky smirk, even while dangling over a certain death. But Scoven's face goes pale when he realizes how precarious the situation really is. He reaches out a hand, but he's just a few feet too far away to help. Ghislain's fingers lose their strength and start to slide off the hilt of his sword. He loses his grip and plummets back into the darkness of the ravine. Scoven looks like he's seen a ghost as he realizes the young master is missing. The soldier's desperate shouts for him echo through the chaos. A faint, familiar voice calls out to him from the darkness. Gislin's eyes snap open, his face drenched in cold sweat. The memory of Elena asking about their mother cuts through his mind like a knife. He finds himself in a void, standing among the shattered remains of his past. He reaches for a shard, reliving the nightmare he's been granted a chance to fix. A hand suddenly grabs his sleeve, yanking him out of the dream. Elena is right there in his memories, sobbing and screaming for him to wake up. He bolts upright in bed, the damp cloth falling from his forehead. He looks around. He's back in his room at the Perdium estate, safe for now. He stares at his hand, still trying to process the fact that he's actually alive. He tries to get up, but the world immediately starts spinning. A sharp pain flares in his chest, a reminder of the toll his regression has taken. He doubles over, hacking and wheezing as his body struggles to keep up. The door flies open with a bang. Belinda walks in, looking surprised to find him sitting up already. Gislin just stares at her, a flood of emotions hitting him all at once. She sets her bucket down, probably ready to launch into a lecture. Before she can even open her mouth, he lunges forward and pulls her into a hug. Belinda's completely stunned. The trash master has never done anything like this. He holds on tight, the room around them still a total mess. A discarded slipper lies forgotten on the floor amidst the chaos. Belinda's expression finally softens, even if she's still totally confused. Gislin's eyes are hard. He's never going to let her disappear again. She eventually snaps and pushes him away, yelling about his lack of etiquette. He starts to speak, his voice far too calm for someone who just woke from a coma. He looks at her with an intensity that stops her ranting mid-sentence. Belinda goes back to scolding him while he just sits on the rug listening. She gives him a massive earful, threatening to throw him in jail if he keeps acting up. She crosses her arms, looking down at him with a mix of annoyance and skepticism. Gislin doesn't say a word, his mind already racing with plans for the coming week. She sighs and shakes her head, convinced he's finally lost it. A photo on the shelf shows a much happier version of him and Elena. He picks it up, his gaze lingering on his sister's smiling face. He knows he has to start training immediately if he wants to protect her. Belinda starts munching on a snack while he turns his focus to the desk. He stands there for a moment, the weight of his second chance settling in. A light creak at the door grabs his attention. He turns his head, his mercenary instincts instantly on high alert. It's the one person he's been terrified to face. His sister Elena. She peers into the room, looking like she's about to burst into tears. Belinda's face is pure shock as Gislin continues to hold her in a tight hug. She stares at him, her mind likely racing to understand what's gotten into her master. Her face turns a deep shade of red as the weight of the situation finally hits her. Gislin stays silent, his expression hidden as he lingers in the embrace. Elena suddenly rushes in and shoves him back, clearly offended by his lack of decorum. The sudden movement causes Gislin to double over, hacking and wheezing. Elena stands back, looking at him with a mix of suspicion and genuine annoyance. She starts screaming, reminding him that she finds even his breath disgusting. Gislin just rubs his neck, his mind far away from her childish insults. Belinda and Elena share a glance, both clearly disturbed by his strange behavior. Suddenly, a violent jolt of pain shoots through his chest. His body begins to spark with mana, his internal cores reacting to the stress. He collapses to the floor, gasping for air as his strength fails him. After a moment, he manages to pull himself together, forcing a small, soft smile. He looks at Elena with a warmth that seems completely alien to her. In the darkness, he sees flashes of the upcoming festival, the turning point he's here to change. He knows he only has 7 days before everything they know is destroyed. Belinda continues to talk, but he's barely listening, his focus already on the future. Fergus, the loyal family knight, appears at the door to take Belinda and check on the master. Gislin looks up at him, his eyes sharp and filled with a new sense of purpose. Elena watches her brother intently, sensing that something within him has fundamentally shifted. The two women look on with worry as the young master prepares to head out. The local market is a hive of activity as the town prepares for the festival. The townspeople stop and stare, their whispers following the trash air wherever he goes. Elena tries to shield him or pull him through the crowd, clearly hurt by the gossip. Ghislain just clutches his face, refusing to let the familiar insults get under his skin. As they return to the castle, the sun begins to set over the horizon. He and Elena climb the stairs, the gravity of his mission weighing heavy on his mind. He wipes the sweat from his forehead, his determination only growing stronger. Even the veteran Fergus is starting to feel the strain of the pace Ghislain is setting. Fergus gives him a hearty, supportive slap on the back, surprised by the boy's drive. Elena smiles, genuinely happy to see her brother and the knight getting along. Another wave of mana backlash hits him, and he has to stop to clutch his head. He keeps pushing forward, not wanting Fergus to see how much he's struggling. He stays silent, his mind already calculating the strength he'll need for the battle ahead. Fergus looks at him with a puzzled expression, trying to recognize the boy he once knew. They reach an old, secluded tower on the outskirts of the castle grounds. Inside, the hall is quiet and filled with the tools of war. Racks of shields and spears stand ready, waiting for someone to pick them up. Fergus stands in the middle of the room, his presence commandingly solemn. Ghislain looks at him, wondering if the old knight stood by his side in his past life too. He turns his gaze back to the training hall, the real work finally beginning. Ghislain gives Fergus a firm pat on the shoulder, a silent gesture of his trust. A faint, knowing smirk crosses his face as he prepares for what's to come. Fergus bows deeply, his respect for the young master having reached a new height. Ghislain turns his back to the knight, his focus already shifting toward his training. He reflects on those he once failed, realizing how short-sighted he had been in his previous life. Alone in the silence of the hall, he prepares to push himself to the absolute brink. High above, the weight of the family name hangs heavy before the great seal of the Count. The image of a tattered wolf banner on a blood-soaked field flashes in his mind, the future he must avert. He closes his eyes, gathering every ounce of mana and willpower he possesses. When his eyes snap open, they are ablaze with a cold electric resolve. He sits in the center of the training floor, beginning the dangerous process of core manipulation. His jaw tightens as the mana within him begins to churn and resist his control. Faint orbs of light start to swirl around him, responding to his internal command. He is haunted by the vision of his former self, a blood-drenched mercenary atop a hill of the dead. He focuses entirely on his hands, weaving the raw mana into the shape of a primary core. A brilliant flare of energy ignites at his solar plexus, the center of his power. Sweat pours down his face as the physical strain of the technique becomes immense. He visualizes the ancient text that describes this forbidden method of multiplying one's strength. With a silent roar of concentration, he forces his mana to divide and stabilize. 3 distinct cores now pulse within him, connected by a blinding pillar of light. The sudden surge of energy is almost too much to bear, and he screams in agony. Blood begins to trickle from his nose and mouth as his body struggles to contain the power. He collapses forward, gasping for air and noting that 3 cores are his current limit. Fresh blood spatters the cold stone, a testament to the price of his new strength. He remembers the enemy who stood against him in the past, the one who took everything. He wipes the blood from his face, his gaze turning as cold and sharp as a blade. He forces himself to stand, the raw energy of the 3 cores vibrating through his limbs. He recalls the faces of the traitors and villains who orchestrated his family's ruin. His eyes burn with an unquenchable thirst for vengeance as he vows to destroy them all. Night settles over the castle grounds, the week of preparation coming to a close. On the morning of the festival, Ghislain meticulously readies himself, tightening his gear. He strides through the marketplace, his sharp features and composed gait drawing every eye. Elena stops dead in her tracks, her expression one of utter disbelief at her brother's change. She confronts him in the middle of the town, finding a man she barely recognizes. She crosses her arms and tries to act smug, but the blush on her cheeks betrays her. Ghislain gives her an exasperated look, while she remains baffled by his new demeanor. A sudden sharp memory or thought catches him off guard, making him wince. Elena lets out a cheerful laugh, delighted to see a crack in his stoic mask. She looks at him with a soft, genuine smile, her eyes reflecting a flicker of hope. Ghislain watches her with a serious expression, the weight of his secret mission never leaving him. He gazes into the distance, his blue eyes reflecting the bright, clear sky of the festival day. Nearby, Belinda warns the guards to keep a close watch on the young master, fearing he might cause trouble. Ghislain maps out his future moves like a grand chess match, his mind considering 1,000 different outcomes. He looks down with a cold, piercing intensity, a black piece in hand as he prepares to challenge fate itself. He reaches for his belt, making sure his gear is secure and ready for whatever the night may bring. In the heart of the festival, Elena happily picks out snacks while Ghislain keeps a careful watch over her. She excitedly pulls him through the market, her laughter ringing out over the noise of the crowd. The sun sets over the Perdium castle, and the festival fires begin to illuminate the dark stone walls. Ghislain's eyes are fixed and narrowed, his mercenary instinct scanning for any hint of trouble. He is struck by a sudden dark memory, the faces of guards twisted with a sinister, greedy intent. In his memories of the past, Elena was always happy being carried around by the loyal soldiers of their house. But those memories are now tainted by the knowledge of the betrayal and ruin that eventually followed. The nightmare of those grinning traitors flashes before his eyes, fueling his resolve to protect her. In the present, Elena runs toward the guards with open arms, completely unaware of the danger her brother senses. The pair moves away from the main square, the festive atmosphere giving way to the cold quiet of the backstreets. Elena gives a huff of irritation as the guards try to keep her within a safe perimeter. She loudly voices her displeasure at being baited, while Ghislain watches the exchange with a detached, calculating air. Suddenly, his gaze snaps to the side, his sharp eyes detecting something out of place in the shadows. He looks down a deserted alley, his body tensing as his combat-honed senses scream of a hidden presence. The silence of the empty street is heavy and expectant, hiding secrets that only he can uncover. Elena continues to drag him along, her brother's transition into a predator going entirely unnoticed by her. She pulls him away from the guards, her expression one of focused, childish determination. She scolds him for being so slow, her voice echoing off the damp stone walls of the narrow passage. In her rush, she bumps hard into the heavy metal armor of a soldier standing in her way. The soldier's face goes pale and his eyes bulge in terror as he feels the crushing weight of Ghislain's killing intent. Elena looks up at the man, her expression morphing into one of pure, unbridled shock at his sudden fright. Elena looks up in shock as they reach the designated spot. The atmosphere has shifted, and not in a good way. Jamal just scratches his head, looking totally unbothered by the fact that he's about to sell out the kids he's supposed to protect. He's grinning like he just hit the jackpot, rubbing his hands together while thinking about that fat payout coming his way. Elena's trembling, her eyes wide with fear as she senses the danger closing in. They walk deeper into the secluded alleyway, further away from the crowd and any chance of help. Suddenly, a group of men blocks their path. Leading them is Frank, looking shady as ever in his trench coat and hat. Frank smirks, adjusting his glasses. He's here to collect the goods Jamal promised him. The trap is fully sprung. They're surrounded by Frank's men in this quiet, dirty corner of the town. Frank stares them down, cold and calculating. He doesn't see a kid, he sees a paycheck. Elena clings to Ghislain's arm, shaking like a leaf as the reality of their situation sinks in. Ghislain, on the other hand, remains perfectly calm. Jamal starts counting his chickens before they hatch, looking smug about how easy it was to lure the trash prince here. Ghislain just watches him, his back to the group. He's seen this kind of betrayal 100 times before. Jamal lets out a mocking laugh, thinking he's already won. To him, the kids are as good as sold. While they're trapped in the shadows, the castle sits peacefully on the hill, oblivious to the blood about to be spilled. Jamal spreads his arms, boasting about his clever plan to ditch this dump of a town with the money he's about to make. But before he can finish his victory speech, Ghislain moves. A flash of blue mana erupts as he strikes with lethal speed. Jamal's eyes go blank as he coughs up blood. He's dead before he even realizes the trash prince just killed him. Everyone is stunned. Philip and Elena look on in pure shock, while Frank's smirk finally disappears. Ghislain stands over the fallen traitor, his blade already dripping. He doesn't even spare Jamal a second glance. His eye glows with a piercing blue light. The mercenary king isn't hiding his power anymore. Philip panics and tries to grab Elena to use her as a shield, hoping to save his own skin. It's a fatal mistake. Ghislain's sword comes down like a hammer, piercing straight through Philip's skull. Philip's face is frozen in a mask of absolute terror as the life leaves his body. 2 traitors, 2 bodies. In less than a minute, Ghislain has cleared the inner circle of snakes. Elena is hysterical, sobbing as she clings to her brother. She's seen far too much for someone her age. Ghislain leans down, speaking softly to her, trying to comfort her for just a brief second. Then, with a gentle tap to her neck, he puts her to sleep. It's better if she doesn't witness the rest of this massacre. He catches her before she hits the pavement, setting her down gently. Now, he can focus entirely on the real threat. Ghislain turns back toward Frank, his eyes burning with blue mana. The hunt is officially on. He stands alone in the middle of the alley, surrounded by the corpses of the men who betrayed him. Frank's crew is all that's left. Frank just takes another puff of his pipe, seemingly more impressed than anything. He's starting to realize this kid is something special. Ghislain shakes the blood off his sword with a clean flick. He's just warming up. He shifts into a combat-ready stance, his gaze never leaving the mercenaries. Frank and his men flare their own mana, blue auras shimmering in the dark. These aren't just common thugs, they're pros. Ghislain reaches for a small tool at his side, his fingers glowing with power. He's thinking several steps ahead. The standoff is tense. It's one boy against a squad of cold-blooded killers, but the boy is the one who looks like the predator. His face is a mask of focus. He's already calculated exactly how many moves it will take to end them. Ghislain raises his blade, the mana around it intensifying until the alley is flooded with a cold blue glow. One of the mercenaries draws his weapon, ready to test his luck against the monster before him. Frank's eyes narrow behind his sunglasses. He finally understands that he's not dealing with a prince but a king. 2 of Frank's men charge forward at once, hoping to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. But Ghislain just pulls out a firework cylinder. He's about to turn this quiet alley into a literal war zone. Ghislain tosses the firecracker high into the air as the hooded mercenaries close in. They're expecting a desperate last stand, but he's already playing a different game. One of the thugs flinches, staring up at the spinning object. He realizes too late that it isn't a weapon. It's a signal. Ghislain lands a direct hit, sending blood spraying from the assassin's face. He follows through with another heavy strike before the guy can even blink. One goon hits the dirt hard as Frank barely manages to scramble back. The 2 of them clash again, their blades ringing out in the empty street. Ghislain locks on, his eyes tracking every slight movement the assassin makes. Frank tries to close the distance, but he's just swinging at air. A sharp cut catches the veteran's side, tearing right through his heavy cloak. Ghislain doesn't let up for a second, pushing the pace with a flurry of strikes. He leans in, focused entirely on ending this fight right now. Another impact sends a fresh spray of blood into the air. Ghislain pivots, catching the assassin off guard with his sheer speed. Frank grits his teeth, clearly getting frustrated that a supposed brat is holding his own. He tries to create some space, but the young noble is glued to him. Their swords lock in a shower of sparks as they push against each other. A thin line of red appears across Frank's throat as the blade grazes him. His pipe gets knocked clean out of his mouth and clatters onto the cobblestones. Ghislain takes a quick breath, readying himself for the next exchange. A massive burst of mana forces the 2 of them apart. Frank clutches his neck, mana beginning to swirl around the shallow wound. Ghislain just stares him down, completely unfazed by the display. The assassin tightens his grip on his weapon as the mana flares. Despite the injury, a creepy grin starts spreading across his face. He looks like he's actually enjoying the pain now. He readies his blade for a desperate counterattack. Ghislain charges straight back into the whirlwind of steel. Frank's eyes go wide behind his shades as he leans into the madness. But then he notices something that stops him cold. His opponent is smiling back. That look alone is enough to make the veteran assassin hesitate for a split second. Ghislain drops low, sliding right under a lethal swing. He connects with a brutal kick that sends Frank's head snapping back. Frank skids across the pavement, struggling to keep his footing. He reaches up to adjust his hat, trying to regain some shred of dignity. But then the internal damage sinks in and he starts hacking up blood. He drops to one knee, a thick trail of red leaking from his mouth. He can't believe it, he's actually losing to this kid. He looks up to see Ghislain's boots slowly approaching him. A terrifying aura begins to radiate from the young noble. He finally unleashes his third core, his eyes glowing with an intense purple light. Frank's confidence finally shatters as he realizes he's trapped. Ghislain leaps into the air, bringing his blade down with everything he's got. The assassin can barely track the movement, the kid is just too fast. A flurry of strikes lands all at once, completely overwhelming Frank's defenses. Ghislain doesn't give him a moment to breathe, pressing the attack with everything he's got. He swings with such force that the air itself seems to scream. Frank manages to block, but he can feel his weapon giving way under the pressure. Large cracks spiderweb across the steel. It's not going to hold much longer. The assassin tries to back away, but Ghislain is already repositioning for the kill. With his third core unleashed, the young noble moves like a blur of lethal intent. Frank's sword finally shatters, pieces of metal flying everywhere like shrapnel. Ghislain follows through immediately, a clean strike tearing through the veteran's defenses. Blood splatters across the assassin's coat as he realizes he's completely outmatched. Ghislain's eyes lock onto his target, cold and unforgiving. He closes in, landing a heavy blow that sends his opponent reeling. Frank lets out a guttural scream as the reality of his defeat sets in. A solid punch connects with his jaw, snapping his head back and sending blood flying. Ghislain hauls him back up, prepared to get the answers he wants. Desperate, the veteran tries to reach for a hidden weapon tucked away. A small wicked-looking dagger slides into his hand. He looks past Ghislain at the unconscious Elena, looking for one last way out. He readies the blade for a final, cowardly throw toward the girl. But before he can even twitch, glowing mana threads wrap tightly around his arm. Frank stares in horror as his limb is frozen in place by the shimmering red lines. Ghislain doesn't even blink, his gaze fixed on the man who dared to threaten his sister. The assassin struggles, but the threads only tighten their grip. Ghislain stands tall, his mana flowing through the air like a spider's web. Without a hint of hesitation, he drives his blade straight into the man's chest. The steel sinks deep, piercing through the armor and into the core itself. Frank gasps, his eyes bulging as blood bubbles up in his throat. Ghislain delivers one last brutal strike to make sure he stays down. The force of the impact sends the assassin flying back into the dirt. Deep inside him, his mana core begins to fracture and crumble. With a sickening sound, the core shatters completely, leaving him powerless. Ghislain's eyes pulse with a sinister purple light as he looks down at the wreckage. Frank collapses, his body trembling as his source of power is undone in a second. He looks into those cold eyes and sees nothing but his own death reflected back. A final agonizing scream echoes through the dark alleyway. Ghislain isn't finished yet, grabbing the dying man to get the truth. His face is like stone, the face of a man who has seen too much war to show mercy. He remembers the shadowy figures from his past life, the ones who served the Duke. He demands the mastermind's name, his fist punctuating every question. One last heavy hit sends the assassin's head hitting the pavement. Frank's sunglasses fall away, revealing a face twisted in absolute terror. Ghislain stands over the body, letting out a sharp, cold breath. The battle is over, but for him the real war is only just beginning. Ghislain leans in close, his eyes burning with cold fury as he stares down at his broken opponent. He grabs the assassin's head, forcing him to witness the consequences of his failure. Blood coats his hands as he holds the man up like a piece of refuse. There is no mercy in the young noble's gaze, only the detached calculation of a veteran soldier. Frank lets out a final, soul-shattering scream as his mana begins to violently overflow. A pillar of light erupts into the night sky, a beacon marking the violent end of a master assassin. The release of energy is blinding, a testament to the power that was just extinguished. When the light fades, Ghislain stands alone amidst the carnage, the walls painted with the price of betrayal. The alleyway is silent now, save for the ragged breathing of the only survivor. Covered in blood and sweat, Ghislain takes a moment to steady himself, his grim mission finally complete. He turns his gaze toward Elena, the one person he was determined to save from this tragedy. His blade, stained with the lifeblood of his enemies, stands embedded in the cobblestones. He draws a deep, shaky breath, the weight of the battle finally catching up to him. The blood on his jaw is a grim reminder of how close he came to losing everything. His strength finally fails him, and he collapses to his knees, coughing up a mouthful of blood. He wipes his mouth with a trembling hand, refusing to let weakness take hold. The sounds of the city seem distant as the adrenaline begins to fade from his veins. Forcing himself back to his feet, he slips through a nearby doorway to avoid any unwanted witnesses. Inside the quiet building, the magnitude of what he's done starts to sink in. He looks up at a crest on the wall, a grim omen of the powerful families he's now defied. Son of Degard. A voice from his memories cries out, echoing with shock and disbelief. He quickly begins to hide the evidence of the struggle, moving with practiced efficiency. A tattered wolf flag from his previous life flickers in his mind, a symbol of the wars he's already fought. He reaches for a healing potion, knowing he needs to recover quickly before the next wave arrives. With Elena secured on his back, he prepares to flee the area as flames begin to lick at the nearby buildings. From the shadows, a mysterious hooded observer watches his every move with keen interest. Ghislain doesn't look back, disappearing into the smoke with the precious burden on his shoulders. Miles away, in a darkened chamber, a group of powerful men gather around a massive stone table. A hooded subordinate kneels before them, delivering the grim news of their agent's failure. The agent grits his teeth, sweating under the intense pressure of his master's collective gaze. That useless bastard of the north, one of the men sneers, his voice dripping with aristocratic contempt. The leader of the group looks on with cold eyes, unimpressed by the excuses for such a costly failure. The agent remains silent, knowing that even a single word could mean his immediate death. Memories of the battle flood his mind, the image of a young man who fought like a literal demon. He saw Ghislain move with a speed and precision that defied any logic. It wasn't just a boy fighting. It was a master of war reborn in a young body. Every strike, every maneuver was perfect, leaving no room for a veteran like Frank to counter. Even as the town burned, the boy never faltered, carrying his sister to safety through the fire and ash. Back in the present, the hooded agent awaits his judgment as the tension in the room reaches a breaking point. The men at the table rise, their faces twisted in rage as they issue the final order. Eliminate him. The agent is dismissed, left alone in the cold, echoing hall to prepare for the inevitable. A new shadow looms over Ghislain, more dangerous than anything he has faced so far in this new life. The hooded agent trembles, the weight of his master's displeasure pressing down on him like a physical force. He knows the price of failure in this inner circle is far worse than a simple death. Across the table, the shadowy conspirators exchange silent, calculating glances, already planning their next move. One of their most powerful warriors stands ready, his massive frame a silent threat to any who defy them. The remnants of the failed mission, shattered steel and broken promises, flicker in the minds of the men in suits. Desperation begins to seep into the agent's voice as he tries to describe the impossible strength of the boy they targeted. But the leaders have heard enough. Their patience for incompetence has reached its absolute limit. From the shadows, a cold, authoritative presence looms over the entire proceedings, silencing the room. A single baleful eye opens in the darkness, and a final chilling ultimatum is delivered. There will be no next time. Far away from the den of vipers, the quiet majesty of the Perdium estate stands firm against the morning light. Fergus, the veteran knight of the household, stands watch, his expression one of stern, unwavering duty. Suddenly, a burst of pure mana cuts through the air of the training hall with startling speed and precision. The veteran is caught completely off guard as a blade whistles past him, guided by an unseen masterful force. To his amazement, the weapon doesn't fall to the ground, but hangs suspended in the air, humming with vibrant power. Thin, nearly invisible threads of mana wrap around the hilt, dancing between the fingers of the young noble. Ghislain stands calmly, his focus absolute as he manipulates the steel as if it were a natural extension of his own body. There is a new depth in his blue eyes, a cold maturity that doesn't belong to a youth of his years. Fergus can only stare in stunned silence, struggling to reconcile the boy he once knew with the warrior standing before him now. The old knight's eyes widen as he realizes the sheer complexity and lethality of the technique being displayed. With a subtle flick of his wrist, Ghislain brings the floating sword back to his side, the mana threads shimmering. The control required for such a feat is legendary, a secret art long thought lost to the annals of history. Ghislain's mind flashes back to the heat of his recent battle, where these very threads were the difference between survival and death. He knows that to protect his future and his sister, he must master this power completely, leaving no room for error. Huh! Fergus mutters, his mind reeling as he tries to find the words to describe the miracle he's just witnessed. Old Fergus can't help but stare at the young master. The air around Ghislain has changed completely. They stand in the quiet training grounds of the castle. It's the perfect place for a private talk. Ghislain looks more composed than he ever did before his illness. There's a weight to his gaze now. Fergus is skeptical, but he agrees to watch. The boy wants to show him a technique he's never seen. He looks out at his family's domain, knowing exactly what's coming for them. He doesn't have much time. Perdium Castle looks peaceful, but the shadows of his past life are already stretching across it. The marketplace is a ghost town. The festivities were supposed to be in full swing by now. Back at the manor, Elena is busy pouting. She's not exactly thrilled about her ruined day. Dinner is served, but the dining hall feels far too large for just the three of them. Belinda is reaching her breaking point, and Elena's constant sighing isn't helping. Ghislain just gives them a dry smile. He knows exactly why everyone is so stressed. The castle gates are barred, but even stone walls can't block out the noise from the streets. His eyes drift toward the window. He can hear them already. The servants move in a hurry. The whole household is on edge. Belinda brings out the next course, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Outside, a literal mob has gathered at the gates, screaming for compensation. They want their money. The merchants are furious that the festival was cancelled. They're demanding the count pay up for their lost goods. Ghislain watches them from above. This is a mess he has to fix before the territory collapses. Belinda notices him looking and starts sweating. She knows the ledger books are a nightmare right now. She covers her mouth, trying to hold back a rant about their dwindling funds. The shouting from the street gets louder. The people are losing their patience. Ghislain realizes the situation is worse than he thought. The family treasury is bone dry. He hums to himself, weighing his options. Relying on the count isn't an option. He gets up from the table, signaling the end of the meal. He has more important things to do than eat. Fergus tries to put on a brave face, but his eyes tell a different story. He knows they're vulnerable. Most of their knights are already up north, stuck in a bloody war against the orcs. The map is a mess of red. They're being squeezed from every side, and the castle is practically empty. He clicks his tongue in annoyance. Every strategic move he makes is limited by their empty pockets. He walks past the table, ignoring Elena's confused look. He's focused on one person now. He leans in close to Belinda. He needs her help with a little financial matter. She looks at him like he's grown a second head. He's the one who spent all his money in the first place. She lets out a short, dry laugh. The idea of him having any savings left is a joke. Ghislain doesn't join in. He's dead serious about needing those funds. He holds out his hand, asking her to lend him whatever she's managed to save from his allowance. Later, he sits on the windowsill, staring out at the town. He's waiting for something. His senses are on high alert. The calm of the evening feels far too brittle. The sound of frantic boots pounding against the floorboards echoes down the hallway. Ricardo bursts into the room, nearly falling over his own feet as he shouts for the young master. He collapses on the rug, gasping for air and clutching his chest. He looks like he's just run a marathon. He screams that it's an emergency. Someone has forced their way into the manor. Ghislain's heart drops. He knows exactly who Ricardo is talking about. He finds Fergus slumped against the wall, his armor dented and his face covered in blood. The old knight has been beaten down. A massive fist slams right into Fergus's face, sending blood and teeth flying. Whoever did this didn't hold back. The attacker pulls back another punch, his arm rippling with sheer power. He's a monster. The second hit connects with a sickening crunch, glowing with a weird dark energy. It's not just a physical punch, it's reinforced with mana. Fergus coughs up a spray of blood. His eyes wide in shock as his mana core takes the brunt of the impact. He's in real trouble. Ghislain stands over his fallen knight, his shadow stretching across the bloody floor. The silence in the room is heavy. Fergus is barely clinging to consciousness, gasping for air as blood pools around him. He's lucky to still be breathing. Ghislain stares ahead, his face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't supposed to happen this soon. His eyes narrow, glowing with a sharp blue intensity. He's scanning the room for the guy who did this. Then he sees him. A towering wall of muscle looms over Ghislain, practically radiating malice. It's Cain Loges. Cain just smirks at him, his amber eyes full of arrogance. He's been waiting for this reunion. Ghislain narrows his eyes. Cain towers over him, looking like a wall of muscle. The big guy just smirks, enjoying the height advantage. Ghislain doesn't even flinch. Cain stands there with his mysterious escort knight. This is Cain Loges, the heir who thinks he owns the place. He's a massive dude with a long sword on his back. He's the guy Ghislain calls his enemy. Ricardo looks like he's about to have a panic attack. Back in the tavern, Cain was already causing a scene. He was chugging ale while treating people like trash. He grabbed Commander Scovin by the face. Just whispered some insult right in his ear. Ricardo can only watch, completely helpless. Cain finally walked out, leaving a mess behind. Scovin was left on the ground, bloodied up. Now Ghislain is the one standing in his way. He's looking at Cain like he's garbage. He remembers how this guy used to manhandle him. The old Ghislain would have been terrified. But that version of him is long gone. He stays calm, letting the memories pass. Cain looks down at him like he's still that weak kid. He finds the whole thing hilarious. Rain pours down on the Loges estate. Cain sits alone, brooding. His escort knight walks in to report. Cain's got a nasty plan in mind. The hooded knight tells him the accident is all set. This guy's eyes glow under that hood. Cain turns away. He cracks his knuckles, ready for a fight. They're confident Ghislain is walking into a trap. A cruel smile spreads across his face. Back in the tavern, Ghislain just stares him down. Cain is still hunched over, laughing at the idea of paying back a debt. He finds the gold coin demand a total joke. His amber eyes are full of malice. Ghislain just stands there, totally unimpressed. He looks like he's already bored of the conversation. He looks down at the mess Cain made. He's done talking. Ghislain catches a glimpse of the past, remembering when he was just a kid under Belinda's watchful eye. Back then he didn't have the cold, determined gaze he carries today. His eyes flare with a sudden spark of mana. To him, Cain Loges isn't a threat anymore, just a source of money. The air in the tavern shifts as the young master settles into his stance. He stands firm amidst the wreckage, facing down the man who used to torment him. Cain stares back, his usual arrogance starting to flicker into confusion. Ghislain looks down at him with eyes that have seen 1,000 battlefields. From the shadows, the escort knight watches the exchange with a sharp eye. Cain tries to bark back, but his voice doesn't carry the weight it used to. Ghislain calmly lays out his terms, treating the whole thing like a simple business transaction. The demand for 1,000 gold coins leaves the big man speechless. He stumbles back, his worldview cracking as the person he once bullied dictates the rules. Ghislain just smirks, a sharp expression that promises a lot of pain. Cain is left reeling while the rest of the tavern stays frozen. Ricardo is stunned, unable to believe the bold words coming from his young master. A heavy boot slams onto the floor, punctuating the silence. Ghislain looms over his old bully, completely reversing their roles. Cain's face twists into a snarl as his predatory instincts take over. He clenches his fist until his muscles bulge. He thinks back to the power he once held over the boy. But the present Ghislain doesn't even look impressed. Kane throws a punch with enough force to shatter stone. Ricardo and the escort knight watch with bated breath as the blow connects. Ghislaine moves like a blur, slipping past the massive fist with ease. The impact rattles the entire room, but the target has already vanished. Kane's eyes widen when he realizes he hit nothing but air. Before he can even reset his stance, Ghislaine is already inside his guard. He catches Kane's massive wrist as if it were a child's toy. His expression remains deadpan, a terrifying contrast to the violence of the moment. With a sudden surge of power, Ghislaine sends the giant crashing to the floor. Kane hits the ground hard, gasping for air while the escort knight looks on. Ghislaine stands tall, his shirt barely wrinkled from the exchange. The escort knight grits his teeth, realizing their plan just got a lot more complicated. The tavern patrons whisper in disbelief, unable to process the total reversal of power. To Ghislaine, this humiliation is just the beginning. He lets out a small, satisfied smirk. Kane cowers on the floor, the full weight of his defeat sinking in. The escort knight's eyes glow with a sinister light. He's far from done. He grips his cloak, his mind already spinning new schemes. He remembers the promise of support for the Loge's family if he succeeds in taking Ghislaine down. Kane pulls on his glove, his eyes burning with a desperate need for vengeance. Kane Loge's roars, donning his blue combat glove as he prepares to crush Ghislaine once and for all. He lunges forward with a strike empowered by a menacing purple aura. Ghislaine Perdium stands his ground, his posture perfectly calm as he tracks the incoming blow. Kane's eyes widen in shock as his opponent proves far more elusive than he anticipated. Ghislaine watches the brute struggle with a cold, analytical gaze. Nearby, Ricardo kneels over Scoven, who remains slumped on the floor, heavily injured from the previous clash. Ghislaine's eyes glow with an intense magical light as he fully assesses the situation. Kane towers over the wreckage, his arrogance bolstered by the shadowy presence of the escort knight. A confident, predatory smirk spreads across Kane's face. He believes the game is still his to win. With a sharp metallic sound, he unsheathes his massive sword, ready to end the duel. Kane points the heavy blade at Ghislaine, his expression one of pure, unadulterated smugness. Ghislaine remains completely unfazed, looking directly at the sharp edge of the weapon. He turns his gaze back to Scoven, the man who was brutally beaten by the brute before him. Ricardo looks up at his young master, his face covered in sweat and panic. A small knowing smile plays on Ghislaine's lips. The stage is now set for a bigger game. In the heart of the city, the festival atmosphere has vanished since the celebrations were abruptly cancelled. Disappointed tourists linger in the streets, regretting the journey they can no longer enjoy. They stand around with full purses, frustrated that they have neither the time nor the events to spend their gold on. Ghislaine's gaze sharpens, his mind already set on the next stage of his scheme. He steps out onto a public arena stage, the roar of a confused and excited crowd filling the air. The crowd's energy is palpable as they witness the standoff between the young master and the massive Kane Loges. The local merchants and townspeople buzz with excitement, sensing an opportunity to profit from the duel. A bookie laughs heartily, welcoming the flood of one-sided bets pouring into his hands. Gold coins rain down on the betting table as everyone rushes to put their money on Kane Loges. Kane slams his heavy sword into the wooden floor of the arena to assert his dominance. He stands tall and broad-shouldered, looking every bit the champion the crowd expects him to be. He looks down his nose at Ghislaine, convinced the young master is nothing more than a joke. Ghislaine stares back, his expression a mask of chilling indifference. Kane Loges and the escort knight stand side by side, their shared malice looming over the arena. Ghislaine turns his head slightly, ignoring the jeers and insults from the onlookers. He walks calmly toward the center of the ring, his hands steady and his mind clear. The escort knight watches from the sidelines, certain that the outcome of this fight is already decided. Even among the crowd, some onlookers can't help but feel a twinge of pity for the weak young master. The bookie's hands tremble as he tries to keep up with the overwhelming volume of bets favoring Kane. Ghislaine looks up, his blue eyes reflecting the light of the sun and the weight of his hidden experience. High above the arena, the consensus among the spectators is that the result is far too obvious to be contested. Kane lets out a mocking laugh, fully enjoying the public spectacle he's about to create. From the edge of the arena, the escort knight observes the one-sided enthusiasm of the crowd. Suddenly, a heavy bag of gold coins is slammed onto the bookie's table with tremendous force. Despite his wounds, Scoven stands tall as Ricardo supports him, placing every coin they have on Ghislain. Ghislain's smirk widens. His loyal subordinate has made his move. The massive bag of gold sits on the table, a silent challenge that leaves the entire crowd in shocked silence. Elena Perdium and Belinda stand before the betting table, their calm expressions contrasting with the shock of the surrounding crowd. Ghislain's gaze softens for a moment as he sees his sister's arrival, but the tension in the arena remains high. The onlookers can't believe their eyes as the young lady of the Perdium family joins the high-stakes gamble. Belinda presents the massive bag of gold, her voice steady as she confirms their intent to bet everything on Ghislain. The escort knight narrows his eyes, sensing that the simple duel he expected has turned into something much more complex. Cain Loges scoffs, his golden eyes burning with irritation at the disruption. With a roar that echoes through the stadium, the signal for the duel to begin is finally given. Cain's perspective narrows as he glares at Ghislain across the arena, his grip tightening on his sword. Ghislain draws his own blade, the silver metal gleaming under the bright sun. He tests the weight of the weapon, his movements fluid and practiced. He stands ready, a sharp contrast to the hulking brute facing him. Ghislain's eyes are cold and focused, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. Cain's face is a mask of murderous intent as he prepares his first move. The giant crouches low, his massive frame radiating an aura of overwhelming physical power. With a sudden explosive burst of speed, Cain launches himself into the air. He descends like a falling mountain, bringing his heavy blade down with terrifying force. Cain's eyes glow with a manic light as he expects his blow to crush Ghislain instantly. Ghislain looks up at the impending strike, his blue eyes wide but filled with calm calculation. Cain's manic grin reveals his savage delight in the impending carnage. At the last possible second, Ghislain twists his body, the massive sword narrowly missing him as it slams into the ground. The impact of Cain's strike is so powerful that it shatters the wooden floor of the arena. Cain doesn't stop, immediately pivoting his body to follow through with another brutal swing. Ghislain is forced onto the defensive, dodging and parrying as best he can against the giant's relentless assault. Dust and debris fill the air as the two combatants clash, the sound of steel on steel ringing out across the stadium. Cain gives a cocky smirk, thinking he's already won. Ghislain doesn't even blink, staring him down with ice-cold eyes. On the sidelines, Elena and Belinda watch the confrontation with Ricardo and the injured Scoven. The Heap Sib smiles under his hood, confident that Ghislain is a dead man walking. He figures that once Ghislain feels Cain's power, he'll spend the rest of the fight just trying to run away. And inevitably, that's when he'll meet a brutal end. Cain lunges forward, swinging his massive sword in a flurry of heavy strikes. He looks like he's having the time of his life as he tries to chop his opponent down. Ghislain catches a strike on his blade, the impact sending sparks flying. The sheer weight behind the swing is enough to push him back. He skids across the stones, his boots scraping the courtyard as he tries to find his footing. Cain leaps into the air for a finishing blow, confident he has Ghislain cornered. Ricardo and the crowd let out a cry of panic as they watch the young master struggle. The Heap Sib watches closely, his glowing eyes fixed on the kill. Instead of getting crushed, Ghislain executes a mid-air flip to regain his balance. He lands perfectly on his feet, looking up at the man who just missed him. He admits he actually wanted to go easy on the guy. But now he's done holding back and charges forward with terrifying speed. Mana glows in his eyes as he blurs past another wild swing. Ghislain ducks low, sliding past Cain with incredible precision. Cain's eyes widen as he realizes he's just hitting the air. Even the knight in the hood is starting to sweat, unable to believe what he's seeing. Ghislain keeps his head down, looking completely focused. He stands behind Cain, looking like he's just out for a stroll instead of a death match. He prepares for the next exchange with a calm, steady gaze. Cain, on the other hand, is starting to look desperate. He spins around and tries one more massive swing. Ghislain's footwork is flawless as he steps into the strike. He parries the heavy blade with a single hand, catching Cain off balance. A sharp kick lands right in Cain's chest, sending him reeling. Ghislain follows up with a series of lightning-fast slashes that pick Cain apart. Cain can only scream in frustration as he's beaten at every turn. With a final blur of motion, Ghislain kicks the massive sword right out of Cain's hands. He slams his foot down on the hilt, pinning the weapon to the floor. He holds his own sword ready, looking down at his disarmed opponent. Cain is left kneeling in the dirt, completely defeated. Ghislain stares down at him with a cold, unyielding expression. Cain is covered in blood from a dozen different wounds, none of them fatal but all of them painful. The townspeople and merchants watch in absolute silence, unable to believe what they're seeing. Whispers spread through the crowd as they realize the useless master just dominated the fight. Elena crosses her arms and smirks, her faith in her brother completely rewarded. Scoven closes his eyes and smiles, finally seeing the man Ghislain has become. The Heap-Sibn watches with glowing eyes, clearly caught off guard by how badly his plan is falling apart. Cain gasps for air, his body a mess of shallow cuts as he looks up at the man he used to bully. He's absolutely fuming, unable to accept that he's being humiliated in front of the entire town. Ghislain just stands there, looking completely unfazed by the desperate glare. He decides he's done playing around with the sword. To the crowd's shock, he casually tosses his blade aside. The weapon spins through the air, clattering onto the stone ground far out of reach. He stands there empty-handed, signaling that he doesn't even need a weapon to finish this. Cain's rage hits a breaking point, his eyes glowing with a feral intensity. He's left on the ground, staring at the boots of the man who just thoroughly dismantled him. Ghislain calmly rolls up his sleeves, ready to end the duel with his bare hands.